I feel like the roadmap of Ethereum is more and more looking like what Celestia was planning to do anyways. So it's very it's very cool to see Mustafa's vision, like Mustafa's original vision, like more and more confirmed and acknowledged by the broader ecosystem.
Ismail, welcome to the show. I'm so pumped to talk about Celestia today. But first of all, how are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Took some time off in December. I'm relaxed and pumped for the next year. Oh, this year actually. Thanks for the invite.
No worries. And 2022, I heard, is going to be a great year for Celestia, which is a pluggable consensus and data availability layer. And for the listeners who have no clue whatsoever what this means, could you give us like an overview of Celestia, what the project is about and which problem you guys try to tackle?
Sure. So Celestia is the like you can think of Celestia as the most minimal layer one, in the sense that it does consensus and something called data availability layer only. So what the chain will do is you put data onto the chain, it orders this data, and it makes sure that it was published, and there's consensus on the ordering. And that is the main idea. It sounds very simple, and it actually is, and that's what makes it so powerful, because you can build completely arbitrary applications on top of that. And it removes a lot of like the scalability bottlenecks of so-called smart contract platforms, where you also can build, like on Ethereum, obviously you can also build arbitrary, it's general purpose. You can build any application on top, but the problem there is that you hit a scalability bottleneck, in the sense that the main chain has to execute all the transactions of these applications, while in Celestia this happens somewhere else in roll-ups or like client side, so to say. Yeah, and then it's a scalability technique for general purpose, so-called, so to say, smart contracts.
Yeah, like rollups is a very good keyword here. Let's talk a little bit about rollups for a minute. So optimistic rollups, I mean, many people know them in the context of Ethereum. I mean, there was like this layer 2 hype that emerged in around April, March 2021. And I mean, as already mentioned, many people like connect this with Ethereum, but could you tell us first what they are and how you guys are using them?
Sure. There are two kinds of rollups, first of all. They're so-called optimistic rollups, and there's ZK rollups, or like so-called these two rollups. So the optimistic rollups are optimistic in the sense that you have something like a chain, and you post the data, the headers, and the data onto another chain. So it's like a rollup is essentially, you could think of it as its own blockchain, and it posts its blocks or a summary of its blocks to another blockchain. And that is like when I say base layer, I mean that other blockchain. So this could be like in the Ethereum world, it's obviously Ethereum. And so in the optimistic rollup case, you're optimistic and you assume that the block producers of these rollups, they are not fraudulent, and they do not like include invalid state. So, but this can happen, of course, especially in the case like in Ethereum, and like in many existing rollups, they are only so-called sequencers. They are centralized. There's only one sequencer. I think we've seen it. I saw it popping up in my Twitter feed this week or last week, I think, that some sequencer went down and some rollup went offline. So it's like, in this case, like where there is only a sequencer, fraud or a so-called invalid state transitions can be easily included, because like it's a very centralized block production, right? So, but if that happens, it should be easy that others submit so-called fraud proofs to prove to light clients and like everyone essentially that such a fraud happened. And this other paradigm, so I said there's two kinds of rollups. This is like the optimistic rollups, and the other paradigm is so-called ZK rollups or validity-based rollups, where you post additionally to like, let's say the header and like some summary of the block, you also post a so-called state fraud proof, a validity proof on chain. So in that case, you have a proof that might be like complex to produce, but very easy to verify. So you don't need these state fraud proofs because you have like a succinct proof that proves to you that the state actually produced according to rules. Does this answer your question? Like what rollups are?
Yeah, that's I mean, like that's a very good overview here. But now it would be like also very interesting. I mean, like as we mentioned, we know this from April 2021 from the Ethereum ecosystem. But it would be super cool to understand what you guys are doing with this technology, because it's like basically also part of the Cosmos ecosystem. So
sure.
What is the value driver here?
So yeah, in Cosmos currently is a bit like a different paradigm, right? Like from Ethereum, you can build applications, and it's not difficult to build them by having your application-specific chains. You deploy your own zone. The problem here, or like the issue here that is often criticized with Cosmos, is that these zones that you spin up, which is like one application, one blockchain, so to say, these applications have their own notion of security, because like it depends on the validator set and the market cap, so to say, of these zones on how secure they are. Like we could go deeper on what like security is, but like roughly, I think everyone understands that it depends on obviously who runs your chain and like and how. So these sovereign chains, they have a completely separate notion of security. And what we're trying to achieve is that you can build your own applications while keeping the same level of security like in Ethereum, without enshrining a particular execution environment, which means like in Ethereum, you have the EVM running as well. So these rollups use Ethereum as a settlement layer. And what we want to do is like decouple this even a step further, so such that the base layer, literally, as I said, only does like consensus and data availability, and everything else has to happen somewhere else. It could be you have a similar settlement layer on top, and on top of that you have arbitrary applications like Ethereum rollups, for instance, or it could look completely different. So there's like the design space grows by a lot by removing one component from the base layer. And so what we want to do is to make it as easy to deploy your own chain, so to say, as deploying your own smart contract. That's the key. I think that's the main takeaway here for how Celestia is different, because like you have your own sovereign chain, you can choose. You have more freedom. You're not like limited in what you choose. You can like you could use Cosmos, the Cosmos SDK as an execution environment. You could use I don't know, Cosmosm as an execution environment. You could even go and take something like the Gorix execution environment, or whatever. You can like completely freedom in choice for how you execute the transactions, and use Celestia only for like ordering these blocks that you produce and make sure that they are dispersed in the network and available.
Speaking of data availability, one thing that's really interesting to me is Celestia kind of like reminds me on the final state of Ethereum, because so the roadmap of Ethereum, for the listeners that don't know, is like they want to push Ethereum in such a direction that Ethereum will become like will be there for data storage basically, and when sharding is rolled out, the Ethereum blockchains will depend on optimistic rollups for the execution layer, and then these rollups will store like the final state of each transaction just on the blockchain, and that's what the blockchain will be there for basically. So Celestia really reminds me on the final state of Ethereum, which will be there in like, let's say 3 to 4 years when sharding is rolled out. So my question, which is also kind of like a fun question to you, do you think Celestia will ship this vision faster than Ethereum?
Short answer, yes. I hope, otherwise we would be doing something wrong. I mean, it's unfair kind of, because we obviously have the advantage that we do not have like a running system that we like have to reach consensus on, and like also social consensus, like all the coordination for an upgrade and some kind of backwards compatibility. And I mean, Ethereum has like this multi-billion network that you can't just shut down and like say like start from scratch, right? Like, but we have the advantage that we can obviously start from scratch because we are doing it right now. And yeah, we will definitely I mean, if we don't ship before Ethereum, we'd be doing it wrong. Like if we don't ship before the final stage, I have to say, I think I'm not sure if I remembered correctly, but I think in the Ethereum roadmap, data availability sampling comes much later. Like the final stage, even there, like data availability sampling is like, is much closer to the very end of the final stage. And we already have like a DevNet running where you can, like it is actually live network that does data, like where you can do data availability sampling. So yeah, I'm very optimistic that we can hopefully, I mean, yeah, as I said, I think we'd be doing something wrong if we wouldn't ship it before then. Yeah.
Yeah, but fair enough. I mean, Ethereum is a gigantic ecosystem, and it's very hard to coordinate everything there. I mean, then there's also like the conflict with the community when introducing a new upgrade. So of course, it's not comparable,
it's not completely fair, yeah. But yeah. But absolutely. Yeah. It's very like, it's funny that like both these systems look so like this end game post. I feel like the roadmap of Ethereum is more and more looking like what Celestia was planning to do anyways. So it's very it's very cool to see Mustafa's vision, like Mustafa's original vision, like more and more confirmed and acknowledged by the broader ecosystem. I really like that. And maybe I could say a little bit about the differences between like what Ethereum's like endgame or like final state and our final state. I think it's as we said, it's very similar, but I think on even in the final state in Ethereum, there's still the execution environment enshrined. So which means that if you have like still smart contracts, the rollups and the smart contracts will still be competing for block space and state, like execution. And in Celestia, this won't be the case because like it's, as I said, like it's decoupled, right? Like it's only data and execution happens somewhere else. So there's no competition there. So it's most likely be, because it's highly specialized, most likely be more efficient there as well.
Yeah, I want to focus on this topic for a second. So you mentioned it with the decoupling. Yeah. So why does it make sense to decouple the transaction execution from the consensus layer at all? What are the thoughts behind this?
I think that the main driver, like the main motivation is that, or the main motivation is the observation that that execution in a general system, the execution is kind of like the bottleneck, right? That's the major reason why this makes sense. So if not everyone has to execute everyone's transaction and download everyone's smart contracts data and as I said, like execute the data as well, then you remove like a major bottleneck from the whole system. I think like this world computer approach that Ethereum took and is very successful with is a brilliant idea, but it's also like intuitively very clear that this does not scale for the whole world, right? And if everyone executes transactions of everyone else on the world, so to say, like very naively, that doesn't scale. And if you decouple this, you can have like execution only where you need it. So like Celestia originally was called lazy ledger because you executed transactions lazily, only on demand. And yeah, and that's still true in Celestia, even if we renamed it.
Yeah, but lazy ledger is actually a quite a cool and also fitting name for this, because as you said, it's way more efficient. And so yeah, cool name. Nice. And now I want to focus on a quote that you guys wrote on your website, which is that Celestia is for decentralized apps what cloud computing is for traditional web. For listeners that don't know or don't understand this quote, could you maybe explain this a little bit more?
Sure. I mean, if you look at the evolution of the web, there's also like a little graphic on our webpage. But like if you look at the evolution of the web, like the early web, each website they had their own physical server, right? And then this changed in the early 2000s, where like websites used shared hosting providers. But these shared hosting providers like made decisions for you. Like I don't remember the names, but like there were systems where you can deploy your website using a certain interface, right? Like it's like in the blockchain world, it would be like an enshrined execution environment. So these hosting providers made decisions for you, but it made it very much easier than before to deploy your own website, right? Like you didn't have to deploy your own physical server. But then like the modern web, like today's web, is websites run on virtual machines that share physical machines. And there again, because you have like a virtual machine at hand, you have more freedom and you can choose how you deploy your website. You can like I'm completely out of the loop of the how you deploy websites today, but like there's obviously, you can choose now your execution environment, so to say. You can choose which system to actually host your website on your virtual machine, because yeah, you have complete freedom there, as if it was a physical machine in the end, right? But you still share this virtual machine with like physical machines with others. And this is like very much translates to the like how the crypto ecosystem is developing. Here the cycles are a bit faster, I feel. But if you look at the like the early crypto ecosystem, there was like application specific chains right from the start, right? Like each blockchain, each application was its own blockchain and has its own consensus, right? Then I mean, there was like Bitcoin, Litecoin, and so on. And then the next iteration is very comparable, as I said, to the early web of the 2000s, where you can much easier deploy your, like much more conveniently deploy your application by choosing a smart contract platform like Ethereum, Solana, Near, and so on. And the next evolution, which I think is already like shaping with shared security on the Cosmos Hub and Celestia, and is that you deploy your application specific chain, but you share security and a consensus layer. So like that's the analogy that we want, or that we are seeing and that we believe in. I think it's a very powerful thesis, and I mean it's already like kind of becoming reality anyways.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it's interesting because Jack Zampolin said something very similar on the show a couple of weeks before. And I mean, like, yeah, Cosmos is all about like creating different creating different chains within the Cosmos ecosystem. And then again, like, for example, in FMOS, people can deploy their smart contracts, for example, from Ethereum on these chains. So this is pretty interesting to see. And speaking of that, let's zoom a little bit out. Let's talk a little bit about the broader Cosmos ecosystem. I mentioned it. There are some chains like FMOS that will give the Cosmos ecosystem exposure to smart contracts. So how do you view this development?
I'm very excited about Evmos. In general, I think it's, I think in the early Cosmos days, we like kind of been a bit, we thought like the EVM is not the way to go. And it's much easier to deploy your application, for instance, in Go using ABCI or whatever you want. Because there's this, I don't know if everyone's familiar with like your listeners, but there's this abstraction layer called ABCI. And then you can build your application on your state machine on top in any programming language essentially you want. And we thought like, yeah, well, this is much better. It's much more convenient. But if you look at the Ethereum ecosystem, it seems that it is actually much easier to deploy, like for the average developer, I'd say like for most developers, it's much easier with the existing documentation and tooling. It's much easier to deploy applications on the EVM. And so I'm very excited about this because this means there will be like even more of an explosion of different applications coming to the Cosmos ecosystem. So yeah, we have like something very similar planned, and we are also collaborating with the Evmos team on that. We call it Sevmos, which is essentially a way for Ethereum rollups to come and deploy on a settlement rollup, so to say, on top of Celestia. So there's like, I think I mentioned it in the very beginning of the call, you can have like Celestia and then a settlement layer on top that like uses Celestia as a data availability layer. And on top of that, you could have like an Ethereum rollup. And I think having all these options, and you can like having people, the possibility for people to choose the amount of freedom they want. If they want to deploy their own, they could also, Cosmos is also about like, you could also go and deploy your own EVM chain, right? Like, and you could like use Evmos if you wanted like to be part of that ecosystem and trust the validator set there. You could also go and deploy on Celestia. And yeah, I'm very, very, very excited. And I think like in general, it's nice to see like how aligned these two approaches are. Where like Cosmos has always been about having some form of modularity or like some form of pluggability. We're just taking it a step further, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super cool, and it also fits like the broader vision of Cosmos, which is like, I feel like the vision of Cosmos is like giving people options, like a lot of different options, because in the end, when we're going to have like hundreds of thousands of chains, people can choose between a lot of different chains, and I think Celestia really fits this vision in general, and I really like it. So taking this step further, what are your general thoughts on the Cosmos ecosystem in 2022 this year?
My general thoughts on the Cosmos ecosystem for 2022. I mean, we've already seen a lot of hype and excitement about the Cosmos ecosystem. I think a lot of people that previously, and also developers and ecosystem who were like previously like kind of dismissing Cosmos as this like little weird project, yeah, kind of seeing it now being relevant. And it's because it's getting so much confirmation. People are now talking about a multi-chain world. Well, that's what like Cosmos has been all about since years anyways, right? So I think yeah, I think we will see more adoption in Cosmos and of IBC, which is like the product that connects chains, so to say. Yeah, I'm very optimistic and very yeah, it's very clear that there will be way more adoption, and this hype is just the beginning, I'd say, of people just realizing, oh yeah, actually a multi-chain world makes sense. We need to connect these chains with each other. Oh, we need bridges. Oh, there's this IBC thing. Oh yeah, that all works, and you can like plug things together, different chains. And I think this will like the broader Cosmos ecosystem will just continue to grow very rapidly. That's I think that's what we're already seeing, and I'm very sure this will continue.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think we saw also many, many milestones by the end of the year, for example. I think it was beginning of 2020, actually, but doesn't matter. Like the total value locked on Osmosis surpassed $1 billion. And Osmosis is not even a year old. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
Osmosis is pretty
very
crazy. It's wild.
Yeah, and we all love it.
Yeah. I mean, Osmosis is also a nice example because it's the first chain that really nicely used IBC and made it like, yeah. When I first I was like, yeah, another DEX, like, oh yeah, but like the way they incorporated, like the way they integrated IBC into the user interface is like, even for me, like I know that IT is powerful, but like seeing it used in that way is like really, really cool.
Yeah, you hear this quite often, that many people say that it was so surprising that Osmosis worked so smoothly from day one. And I mean, there weren't big problems on the road so far. So that's very, very amazing to see. But now let's talk about Celestia one more time. What is up to come? Could you share us some hints of your roadmap? What can we look forward to?
Sure. As I said, we have these like DevNet running, which is you like, very roughly speaking, it's the Cosmos hub with less modules. Currently there's no governance module. There's no upgrade module. Like we left away a few modules, but we added the ability to do data availability sampling. We did this in a way that is not very invasive into Tendermint, but instead we spin up a separate peer-to-peer network where you can do the data availability sampling. So what is there to come? Without going too deep into the weeds, I'd say like what is missing there is currently you have to run a Tendermint node together with what we call a bridge node, which is like spins up this secondary peer-to-peer layer. We want to change that you can like run a full node that fully executes the state without running a Tendermint node. Doesn't sound too exciting, but it's very important for the security of the network. And I think the moment we got that feature and stabilized everything more, we will have a second testnet. And then I think if this is also as successful as the DevNet and runs and everything works as expected, we will spin up an incentivized testnet where the focus will also be slightly more on the developer experience and the actual building of applications on top, the execution environment, so to say. Hopefully, we will also be able, in between, maybe already on the testnet, maybe the latest on the incentivized testnet, we'll be able to ship the what I called SevMos before, which is like the EVMOS settlement layer on top of Celestia and a roll-up execution environment on top of that, for instance. So yeah, so if this all works, I think with like almost feature complete, a major building block that is still missing is like state fraud proofs, but it's also easier to do those in the EVM context. Also easier to do those in the like, as I mentioned, this settlement hub or settlement layer. It will be easier because like the EVM is a more clearly defined execution environment, while the Cosmos SDK, you can basically do, as I said previously, you can basically do any Go code, right? Like it's not very limited in what you can do. But here the limitation for state fraud proofs actually makes sense, because a state fraud proof essentially is in its core, you take some transaction, you take a state root, you apply the transaction to the state and get like a new state root, so to say. This is also how like various Ethereum optimistic rollups will tackle this. So there's this also this notion to do like an execution step, which is like more granular than applying the whole transaction. And most likely we will use that same approach. If I'm getting too technical, just stop me. Yeah, so state fraud proofs are a major milestone that we want to achieve, at least in some form. Yeah, I think testnet, incentivized testnet, and then hopefully mainnet. Maybe we do like a few testnets in between, but this will be just iterations on the running testnets, I'd say.
Yeah, that sounds pretty massive, to be honest. And I mean, all these testnet developments are always pretty interesting. So how can get people involved and learn more about Celestia and maybe engage with you guys on social media?
So yeah, we have like I think our homepage has links to all the social media, but I could recommend to follow us on Twitter, Celestia.org, and yeah, the homepage is also celestia.org, and we got Discord. On Discord, if you want to join the DevNet, on Discord there's already a very lively and cool community shaping. We never intended the DevNet to be public, but we then it was stable enough and was like, yeah, let's make it public. And then suddenly we ran out of validator slots. We have like over 200 validators, but only 100 validator slots. So, but there's still, I think there's still, it's still interesting to join the DevNet, and you could also run like a non-validating node, like a like actively consensus participating node, or just play around with delegations and stuff, obviously. Yeah, I think the most lively developer community is on Discord. For announcements and stuff, I would say Twitter is the right channel, and yeah, there's also a Telegram channel where also like I'm rarely, but sometimes they happen, like very interesting discussions happen there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, guys, you heard it here first. As always, you can find all the links in the description below. I think, especially if you are a dev, it's pretty interesting what is going on at Celestia. So make sure to check out these links. And with that being said, Ismail, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show on This Week in Cosmos. And I hope I see you very soon. And greetings to Berlin.
Thank you. Greetings to Lisbon, and thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. I'm looking forward to the next Cosmoverse. Bye-bye.